Hey everybody, this is Dream, and this is going to be my breakdown of the Auto Trader Echo Park race for the NASCAR Cup Series. This is at Texas. So we have some pretty good options on this particular track. Lots of guys above the 8,300 and then several guys below that line. Obviously, we need to have a few guys below that line in order to pay for the drivers here. And as you know, on fantasy NASCAR, having starting position farther back gives you more opportunity to gain points because you get a point every time you move up a position. Starting at the front makes it more difficult to get a top tier amount of points. So without further ado, let's go and get into it. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the odds on the race are as well. These are the top 6 drivers. Hamlin, Larson, Busch, Bell, Elliott, and Blaney are considered the top 6 when it comes to the Vegas odds. Of those drivers, really, the only one I don't like is Hamlin, simply because he's been absolutely terrible at this track in the past and hasn't had very many good finishes. So, with that said, I still think that all those guys are in play here, but I won't be mentioning Hamlin in my breakdown because he's just been completely terrible at this track. So, with the drivers I do like, so Kyle Larson is going to lead off here. He's starting 9th. He has some really good finishes at this track and has scored a lot of points. He hasn't been perfect, though, and he's had some bad races as well. So he's not the most ideal option, but his starting position is actually pretty decent for his potential here. Then we're going to look at Chase Elliott. Now he starts 6th. He is capped due to his starting position, but he's been good at this track in the past and most of his career, and he should be able to get a top 10 in this race. Obviously, we'd want him to be in the top 5 given the starting position, but which is doable in this particular track. Then we're going to look at Christopher Bell, who's starting 22nd. He's probably the second best when it comes to most potential in this race. He's had 2 top 5 finishes here in the last 2 races in the Cup Series. He's only run 3 Cup races at this track, but this is the best car he's had at this particular track too, so he should be able to get in the top 5, and his starting position makes him super advantageous here. He's probably going to be my top driver to put in my into my lineup. Kyle Busch is another guy that's in a really great position due to his starting position. He is starting 18th, and he's second best behind Christopher Bell as the top options to start, with the expensive guys just because of his starting position. He's had many good races at this track, and his starting position obviously makes him have the most upside on the whole entire field. He does have the potential to win this race as well, which he's done in the past. Then Martin Truex Jr., now he's starting at 15th, which is also a pretty good spot for him. But he's had some bad finishes at this track, but he still has upside due to the starting position, and he gets top 10 every race. He has no issues here. So he is a top 10 car. It's just a matter of him actually completing the race. Then we're going to look at Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney is in a good spot here. He can get a top 10 in this car, and he's done that 7 straight races, Cup races here at this track. So I think he's a relatively safe option, but he has capped on points a little bit. Kevin Harvick is another driver I think is in a really good spot for this particular race. He starts 23rd. He's had a couple of bad weeks in a row due to issues that he had no control over. So if his car doesn't malfunction, like a lot of cars have been, and he doesn't get into a wreck, which will happen a lot in this particular track, he has position here that gives him a pretty good amount of upside, starting 23rd. And finally, for the drivers above the 83-33 spot, Bubba Wallace, he's driving Kurt Busch's car, so this gives him an advantage because that car is a little bit better than his typical car, and he already proved he can win with this car, and this is the type of track where he has some upside. He hasn't been good here in his career, excuse me, but I still think that he has some upside in this race, and he starts 19th. Then we have 4 drivers below this line that we should consider. One of them is Eric Jones, who starts 27th. He should be able to get a top 15 finish in this race, which is this is the second worst starting position he's ever had at this track, and he's been able to get a lot of top 15 finishes. So he's a pretty solid option at a cheaper price that you can get some upside at. Then we're going to look at Austin Cindric, who starts 11th. So this is his first Cup race at this track. but he has finished top 5 in all of his truck and Xfinity races. Now, Cup Series is quite different, but he's been proving the last few weeks that he's, and for the last couple months, in fact, that he can get a top 10, top 15 finish in these Cup cars with his particular car now. And so I think he's in a position where he has opportunity. It's going to be tough to get a top 10, but he's starting in a position. He's definitely got a fast car. At Briscoe, Chase Briscoe, who's starting in 30th place, he has a top 15 car as well, just like Cindric does, and his starting position makes him a very good option. When finally Brad Keselowski, he's leading off the track. Now, he has always finished pretty well here. He is capped to a starting position, but he could end up just kind of running the table here. And if you get a lot of fastest laps lead laps at this particular track, you really can boost your points because this is just how this track goes. It's not going to have a whole lot of passing up at the front except on restarts. And so if he can get out and lead early, he'll get some opportunity to get some. If he can stay out there, he can get a lot of lead laps. And so that gives him some upside. And his price is pretty cheap at $6,800. Then I have 4 drivers that are very Hail Mary type that I'm just going to mention in case you want to do some Hail Mary craziness. So Justin Haley, he actually has a pretty good car, but he is starting 31st. And so that does give him some option to get up in this track. And he's only $5,700. Ty Dillon is not as good of a driver as Justin Haley is, but he still has some upside on this particular track simply because he's starting 32nd. BJ McLeod, he starts 34th, 2 places behind Ty Dillon, and he also has some upside in this particular track if he can stay out of trouble. And then finally, Smithley, who starts 33rd, in between Dillon and McLeod, is in a similar position and has some upside at this particular track, simply because of his starting position and the fact that we're going to have some crashes, and these guys will have some potential to move up from their individual starting places. Obviously, we do need those, at least the extreme bottom 3, Dillon, McLeod, and Smithley. We need quite a few race, issues in the race where they don't get caught up in them in order for them to really pay off here. But it is possible, and so they are worth mentioning. And same with Justin Haley. With that said, I think this track race is going to be pretty good. Probably not the most exciting race though of the season, simply because it's probably not going to have a ton of passing at the front. But it will have a lot of crashes, probably, especially if it's anything like the Xfinity race, where there was just a bunch of crashes, one right after another. I think that's a potential at this particular track. Not only that, but with the way cars have been breaking down a lot lately, this is another track where that could potentially be a problem. So with that said, this is my breakdown of this race. My top 3 are going to be Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, and Kyle Larson are my top 3 drivers, top 3 finishers for this track, in my opinion. So with that said, thank you guys again for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day.